Snow began falling late at night and continued without rest. By early morning the neighborhood was covered in a thick white blanket. The street was silent except for the soft sound of wind pushing snow across the ground. Houses looked frozen in time. Lights were off. Cars were buried. The only movement came from one driveway at the edge of the road. Paul stood outside his small house just before 6 in the morning. He had arrived home from work less than an hour earlier. His body felt tired, but his mind stayed alert. He worked nights at a hospital in the next town. Snow days were never days off for people like him. If the road stayed blocked, no one could reach help, food, or work. Paul looked toward the road that curved down the hill and disappeared into trees. That road was the only way in and out of town. When it closed, the town felt cut off from the world. Paul had seen it happen before. Cars stuck. Plows delayed. Tempers rising. He did not want that again. He rolled his old snowblower out of the garage. The machine was scratched and loud but dependable. He checked the fuel and pulled the cord. The engine came alive with a rough sound that echoed through the quiet morning. Paul guided it down his driveway, pushing snow aside in heavy waves. Cold air filled his lungs. Snow dust clung to his coat. He worked steadily, not rushing, not stopping. His goal was simple. Clear his driveway, then start opening the road edge so the plow could pass later. This was not his job, but it had become his habit. Many neighbors depended on him without ever saying it. As he finished his second pass, a light suddenly turned on across the street. A door opened sharply. A woman stepped outside and stood on her porch. She watched him for a moment, her face tight and focused. Her name was Linda. She was the head of the homeowners group and took her role very seriously. Linda held her phone up as if it were a badge. She walked through the snow toward Paul, her boots sinking with each step. Her posture was stiff. Her mouth was already moving before she reached the edge of his driveway. She raised her voice over the sound of the snowblower and said the noise rules did not allow machines before 8 in the morning. She said people were sleeping. She said complaints had already been recorded. Paul turned off the snowblower and listened. The silence returned quickly. Snow fell gently again. Paul removed one glove and rested his hand on the machine. He looked tired but calm. Paul explained that the road needed to be cleared early. He said emergency workers used it. He said the town depended on it. He spoke slowly and clearly. His voice stayed respectful. Linda did not listen. She pointed to her phone and said the rules applied to everyone. She said fines would be issued. She said this was not a personal matter. She said she was simply enforcing community standards. Paul glanced down the road again. Snow was already drifting back into the cleared space. He knew that waiting 2 more hours would make the job harder. The plows would struggle. Cars might get stuck. Someone might need help and not reach it. He tried one more time. He asked Linda to use common sense. He said winter mornings were different. He said the rules were meant for normal days. Linda shook her head. Her face showed no doubt. She told him to stop immediately. She said this was his final warning. Paul stood still for a moment. He could feel frustration building, but he kept it under control. He nodded once. He turned off the snowblower completely and rolled it back toward the garage. He did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He did not insult her. Linda watched closely as he put the machine away. She seemed satisfied. She turned and walked back to her house without another word. Her porch light went off. The neighborhood returned to darkness. Paul closed the garage door and leaned against it for a moment. The quiet felt heavier now. Snow kept falling. He looked at the road again through the small garage window. The path was still blocked. Nothing would move for hours. Inside the house, Paul removed his coat and sat down. His boots were wet. His hands were cold. He poured himself a cup of coffee and stared at the wall. His thoughts moved slowly at first, then sharpened. He thought about how often rules were used without thinking. He thought about how some people followed paper more than people. He thought about how the town depended on that single road and how easily it could be closed. Paul knew the layout of the area better than most. He had lived here for years. He knew the side paths, the narrow turns, the slopes where snow piled up fast. He knew where plows struggled and where trucks turned around. A quiet idea formed in his mind. He did not smile. He did not feel angry anymore. He felt focused. If the rules were to be followed exactly, then he would follow them. If machines could not run early, then no clearing would happen early. Not just his driveway. Not the road edge. Not the access points. Paul finished his coffee and stood up. Outside, the snow kept falling, slowly closing the town in. The only way to town remained buried, untouched, and waiting. Morning slowly arrived, but nothing changed. Snow continued to fall, steady and thick, covering every cleared space as if no effort had ever been made. The road stayed silent. No engines. No footsteps. No movement. The town felt locked inside a white shell. Paul woke up in the afternoon after a short sleep. His body was rested, but his thoughts were sharp. He looked out the window and saw the same scene as before. Snow piled higher. The road still blocked. No plow had come. He checked his phone. There were messages in the neighborhood group chat. At first, they were calm. People asked if anyone knew when the plow would arrive. Someone said the weather report showed heavy snowfall until evening. Another said the road was getting worse. Paul read without replying. He made a simple lunch and ate slowly. He did not rush. He knew time mattered now, but not in the way people thought. Around noon, the first complaint appeared. A neighbor wrote that they had a doctor appointment in town and could not get out. Another said their delivery was delayed. Someone else asked why no one had started clearing yet. Paul stayed silent. Linda joined the chat soon after. She wrote that the rules were being followed and that power equipment could be used after 8 in the morning. She added that residents should remain patient and respectful. Paul read the message and felt a calm settle in his chest. The rules were being followed. Exactly as stated. Outside, the snow finally slowed, but the damage was done. Drifts had formed along the road. The curve near the hill was completely buried. Even a large truck would struggle now. By mid-afternoon, the tone in the group chat changed. Messages came faster. Words showed stress. People said they were running out of supplies. Someone mentioned a family member who needed medicine from town. Another asked if anyone owned a truck that could push snow. Paul looked out the window again. He knew he could clear it. He knew how. But he also knew what would happen if he did. At 3 in the afternoon, a knock came at his door. Paul opened it to find Tom, his neighbor from 2 houses down. Tom looked tired and worried. Snow clung to his jacket. Tom said his car was stuck and his kid needed to be picked up from a friend's place later. He asked if Paul could help clear a path. Paul listened carefully. He nodded slowly. He said the rules did not allow power equipment before the approved hours. He said he did not want to cause trouble. Tom frowned. He said it was already past 8. Paul explained that he had followed instructions earlier and was told not to continue. He said he did not want fines or complaints. Tom understood more than he expected. He sighed and thanked Paul anyway. He walked back into the snow, shoulders heavy. Not long after, another knock came. This time it was Linda. She stood stiffly on the porch, phone in hand. Her voice sounded controlled, but tension showed in her eyes. She asked why the road was still blocked. She asked why no one had cleared it. Paul answered calmly. He said he had started early but was told to stop. He said he respected the rules. He said he waited for the approved time, but by then the snow was too deep for small machines. Linda looked toward the road. She could see the problem clearly now. She said the plow should have come. She said she would call the service company. Paul nodded and wished her luck. Hours passed. The plow never came. The service company could not reach the road. Trucks could not climb the hill. The only access stayed blocked. By evening, frustration spread through the neighborhood. People stood outside in small groups, talking loudly. Some blamed the weather. Some blamed the town. Some blamed each other. Paul stayed inside and watched from a distance. The group chat exploded with messages. People demanded answers. Someone asked why Paul did not just clear it like he always did. Another replied that he had been stopped earlier. Silence followed that message. Linda sent a long message explaining the importance of community rules. It did not calm anyone. As night fell, the truth settled in. The road was blocked. No one was leaving. No one was coming in. Paul sat at his table and thought carefully. He did not feel proud. He did not feel guilty. He felt certain. Rules without reason created problems. This was one of them. Late that night, Paul received a private message from Linda. She asked if he could help clear the road in the morning. She said the situation was serious. She said exceptions could be discussed. Paul read the message twice. He did not reply right away. Outside, the town rested under snow, quiet but tense. The only way to town stayed closed. And everyone now understood how fragile that single road truly was. Morning came again, slow and pale. The sky was gray and heavy, and the snow on the ground looked harder than before. It had settled overnight, packed tight by cold air. The road still lay buried, silent and untouched. No tire marks. No footprints. The town felt smaller now, closed in on itself. Paul woke early even though he did not need to. Habit pulled him from sleep. He stood by the window and studied the road. He measured the depth of the snow with his eyes. He imagined the work required. He knew it would take hours, maybe more. He also knew it was possible. His phone buzzed on the table. Messages waited. Some were from neighbors. Some were from people he barely spoke to before. The tone was different now. There was no blame in most of them. Only need. One message said a family had run out of baby food. Another said an older man needed supplies from town. Someone asked if anyone could reach emergency help if needed. The words felt heavier than before. Paul set the phone down. He breathed slowly and made breakfast. He did not rush his thoughts. He believed rushing caused mistakes. Outside, people were already awake. Doors opened. Small groups gathered near the road. Voices carried through the cold air. Frustration had turned into worry. Linda stood near the corner of the street, talking with two neighbors. Her posture was different. Her arms were no longer crossed. Her phone stayed in her pocket. She looked tired. Paul stepped outside, pulling on his coat. A few heads turned. Conversations slowed. People watched him quietly. Linda noticed him and walked over. She stopped a few steps away, leaving space between them. Her voice was softer than before. She said the town council could not send help until the road was cleared enough for plows to reach it. She said people were asking questions. She said the situation had become serious. Paul listened without interrupting. He nodded once. Linda said she understood now that stopping the early clearing had made things worse. She said she was willing to admit that. She said exceptions should be made when safety was involved. Paul looked at her carefully. He did not show anger. He did not show satisfaction. He asked one simple question. He asked if she would put that understanding in writing and send it to the neighborhood group. Linda hesitated. She looked around at the gathered neighbors. She saw their faces. She nodded slowly. She agreed. Minutes later, a message appeared in the group chat. Linda wrote that emergency and safety needs came first. She wrote that early clearing was allowed in severe weather. She wrote that she took responsibility for the earlier decision. People reacted immediately. Some replied with thanks. Some with relief. A few with silence. Paul read the message. He felt the shift. Not just permission, but trust had been returned. He walked back into his garage and rolled out the snowblower. The sound of the engine starting filled the street. This time, no one complained. Instead, doors opened wider. People stepped closer. Paul began with the road edge, cutting a clean path through the packed snow. The machine struggled at first, but he adjusted his pace. Snow flew to the sides in heavy arcs. Cold burned his face. His arms worked steadily. After a while, Tom joined him with a shovel. Another neighbor followed. Then, another. Someone brought a small tractor. Someone else brought hot drinks. The work became shared. Paul still led, guiding where to clear first. He pointed out the curve near the hill. He explained where drifts formed fastest. People listened. Hours passed. The road slowly reappeared beneath the snow. Dark pavement showed through. The path widened enough for a truck. Hope spread with every cleared section. Linda returned with gloves and a shovel. She did not speak much. She worked quietly beside others. No one made comments. The work mattered more than words. By afternoon, the road was passable. Not perfect, but open. A cheer went up as a truck from town reached the edge of the neighborhood. Supplies arrived. Messages of relief filled the group chat. Paul shut off the snowblower and rested his hands on the handle. His muscles ached. His face was numb. But the road was open. People thanked him directly this time. Not with messages, but with words and looks. Paul accepted them with a nod. He did not seek praise. Linda approached him once more. She thanked him sincerely. She said she had learned something important. She said rules should serve people, not block them. Paul nodded again. He said winter taught lessons quickly. As the sun dipped low, the town felt connected again. Cars moved. Lights turned on. The road carried life once more. Paul returned to his house as evening settled in. He knew the story was not over. But something had changed. Not just the road, but the way people looked at rules and at each other. The day after the road opened felt different. Snow still covered the ground, but the air was lighter. Cars moved slowly along the cleared path. People waved at each other in ways they had not done before. The town felt awake. Paul slept longer than usual. His body needed it. When he woke, sunlight filtered through the window and reflected off the snow outside. He stood quietly for a moment, listening. No engines. No shouting. Just calm. Later that morning, Paul stepped outside to check the road. The surface was still rough, but usable. Tire marks showed that people had gone to town and returned. Life had resumed. As he walked back toward his house, he noticed Linda standing near the community notice board. She was holding papers and adjusting them against the wind. She looked focused, but not tense. Paul slowed but did not stop. Linda noticed him and turned. She greeted him by name. Her tone was polite, careful. She asked if he had a moment. Paul nodded. Linda explained that the homeowners group would be meeting that evening. She said recent events showed that some rules needed review. She asked if Paul would attend and share his experience. Paul hesitated. He was not someone who enjoyed meetings. He preferred action to discussion. But he also knew that silence allowed problems to repeat. He agreed. That evening, the small meeting room filled with residents. Chairs scraped against the floor. Coats were hung by the door. The mood was serious but respectful. Linda stood at the front and opened the meeting. She spoke plainly. She admitted that strict enforcement without judgment had caused harm. She said leadership meant listening as much as enforcing. People listened closely. Paul spoke next. He did not raise his voice. He did not accuse. He described what he saw that morning when the snow fell. He described the single road and what it meant. He explained that rules were tools, not walls. He spoke about trust, about how communities worked when people looked out for each other. No one interrupted him. After Paul finished, others spoke. Some shared frustration. Some shared understanding. A few admitted they had relied on Paul without realizing it. By the end of the meeting, changes were proposed. Emergency exceptions would be written clearly. A volunteer list for snow days would be created. Responsibility would be shared. Linda wrote notes carefully. She asked for help organizing the new plan. Several hands went up. Paul left the meeting feeling tired but hopeful. Over the next few days, the town adjusted. Signs went up with clear guidance. People checked in on neighbors more often. Snow tools were shared. The road stayed open. Paul noticed small things. Someone cleared his walkway without asking. Someone left soup at his door. Gratitude showed through actions. Linda stopped by one afternoon. She thanked him again, this time without formality. She said leadership was easier when people reminded her what mattered. Paul accepted the words quietly. Winter continued, but the town felt stronger. Snowstorms came and went. Each time, people acted together. The road stayed clear. Paul returned to his routine. Work, rest, repeat. But something inside him felt settled. The lesson had reached beyond one morning. Rules still existed. But now they came with understanding. And the only road to town remained open, not just by machines, but by shared effort and trust. Winter slowly began to loosen its grip on the town. Snowbanks shrank day by day. Water dripped from rooftops in steady lines. The road that once trapped everyone now showed dark pavement for most of its length. The town breathed easier. Paul noticed the change not just in the weather, but in people. Neighbors spoke more often. They asked questions before assuming. They helped without waiting to be asked. Small habits had shifted, and those habits changed the feeling of the place. One morning, Paul returned home after a long night at the hospital. The sky was pink with early light. He expected quiet, but instead he saw movement. Two neighbors were clearing slush from the road edge. Another was spreading sand near the curve. No one told them to do it. They simply did. Paul parked and watched for a moment. He felt something warm settle in his chest. Not pride, but relief. He went inside and rested. Later that day, the neighborhood group chat buzzed again. This time the messages were different. They shared updates about weather. They shared offers to help. They shared thanks. Linda posted a final update about the rule changes. The new guidelines were approved. Emergency judgment was now written clearly. Noise rules included winter exceptions. Responsibility was shared across volunteers. The message ended with a short line of thanks to the community. Paul read it and put his phone down. Weeks passed. Winter faded into early spring. Grass slowly appeared along the edges of snow piles. The road stayed clear without struggle. The town no longer waited for one person. One afternoon, Paul walked to the small store near the road entrance. Linda was there, sorting supplies. She greeted him with a smile that felt natural. She said the town council had noticed the changes. She said other nearby communities asked how they managed winter access so well. She said the answer was simple, but not easy. Paul listened. She said people learned to balance rules with reason. Paul nodded. Later that week, a small gathering took place near the road. It was not official. Just neighbors sharing food and stories. Laughter filled the cold air. Children played near the snowbanks. Cars passed freely. Paul stood slightly apart, watching. Tom joined him and thanked him again, not just for the snow, but for standing firm when it mattered. Paul said nothing, but his expression said enough. As the sun set, lights flickered on across the town. The road carried cars, voices, and life. It no longer felt fragile. Paul walked home under a darkening sky. He thought about that early morning when everything changed. He thought about silence, snow, and a single decision. He understood now that standing calm was sometimes stronger than arguing. That patience could teach louder than anger. Inside his house, Paul placed his gloves by the door. Winter tools rested quietly in the garage. They would be needed again someday. But next time, they would not rest unused. The town had learned its lesson. Rules still existed. But people came first. And the only road to town stayed open, not because of one machine, but because a community chose to move together.